My name is Dr. Marian Duggan and I'm a lecturer in criminology at the University of Kent. My research focuses on gender, sexuality and victimisation, and specifically within this domestic violence, sexual violence and homophobic hate crime. The research I'm going to be talking about today is domestic violence prevention. So the reason I put a question mark at the end of the title is because I'm looking at a particular policy that's quite new, it's less than 2 years old, and so far there's been no evaluation done into how effective it is. So this policy is designed to prevent domestic violence, but we don't know how well, if at all, it's working. Now, domestic violence is a crime that's quite prolific. The numbers for reports to the police are quite high, around about 400,000 a year. And the levels of people who are likely to experience it are also quite high, with estimations of around 1 in 4 women at some point over the course of their lifetime experiencing domestic violence. There's also quite a prolific statistic around this particular crime that I first learnt when I began my undergraduate criminology degree 15 years ago, and that's that on average 2 women a week are killed by a current or former partner. Now 15 years later, I start my own gender and crime module with that same statistic because nothing has changed. So in the interim period, over 1,500 women have been killed by a current or former partner as a result of domestic violence. So I'm very much invested in trying to ensure that we can prevent it if we have the mechanisms to do that. So what is domestic violence? This is a useful tool, it's called the Duluth wheel, and it's used by police, domestic violence advisors and awareness raisers to try and get to the heart of the different types of controlling behaviours, abusive behaviours or threatening types of situations that people may experience. So in order to intervene effectively and ensure that somebody can be safeguarded against further abuse, they need to recognise what's happening to them is abuse. And very often statistics have shown that it takes 35 incidents on average before somebody recognises what's happening to them is domestic violence. Some of these kind of more minimal behaviours or behaviours that people might play down are things that, if they do escalate, can lead to the types of statistics we have around, on average, 2 women a week dying. So this type of interventions, these types of mechanisms are useful because domestic violence is the kind of crime where prevention needs to happen because the cure is no good. We can't bring women back from the dead. We're not going to be able to do anything once it's got to the level of fatal violence. So the particular policy I'm looking at is called the Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme. So this is something that was launched on the 8th of March 2014, which is also International Women's Day, by the Home Secretary, by Theresa May, under the idea that it was going to be revolutionary, it was going to be something that would prevent violence, it was going to equip people with the tools they needed in order to safeguard their own livelihoods. So it's also known as Clare's Law, and it's named after this person, Clare Wood. So Clare Wood, in 2007, met this person, George Appleton, online, on an online dating forum, as many people do now. It's becoming far more regular for people to meet online and meet with people they ordinarily wouldn't have interacted with on an interpersonal basis. Because they met online, she didn't know very much about his background. They were strangers. Nonetheless, they got into a relationship that lasted for about 18 months before Clare eventually ended it on the basis of his infidelity, him cheating on her with other women. In the following weeks and months, George's behaviour towards Clare became increasingly violent. He threatened her, he stalked her, he turned up at her house, he physically assaulted her, he sexually assaulted her, and it led to quite a lot of police engagement. She had safeguarding measures put in her home, locks changed, panic buttons, but it didn't stop him from trying to access her in a way that became increasingly threatening and increasingly violent. Unbeknownst to Clare, George had a significant history of violence towards women, having already gone to prison for a particular incident of violence against one woman. But she didn't know this. She didn't have any way of finding out this information. So in 2009, George Appleton killed Clare Wood. He strangled her and set her body on fire before later taking his own life. Following the coroner's report into Clare's death, she suggested that perhaps a mechanism should be put in place where people could find out about a person's previous history of violence towards women in order to be better equipped with information to make decisions about their own safety. This suggestion was taken up by Clare's dad, and a petition was raised which eventually led to the Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme. So this essentially allows people the opportunity to ask for information which may be held on a partner who they are perhaps slightly unfamiliar with or have concerns about their behaviour. They can apply to the police, and the police then make a decision, if there is information, whether or not to disclose that to the applicant. Now, the initial research that I've done so far has indicated that in some cases information may be held but not disclosed for a variety of reasons. So in the first 12 months of this policy being in operation, there were 4,000 applications made to various police forces across England and Wales. 1,300 of these applications resulted in a disclosure, but that doesn't mean that the remainder didn't have any information. In some cases there was no information, in some cases there were technical issues or criteria issues, or the way in which the applicant was uncooperative with the police, or further safeguarding issues. So part of my research is looking into how can we make this application process more robust. However, as we know with domestic violence, it may be the case that not everybody goes to the police, and therefore the police aren't aware of the information that people may have. They can only disclose something on the basis of what they know. So these applications, when they say there's no information to disclose, this may mean that the person previous didn't go to the police, but there's something about the new partner's behaviour that has caused some apprehension or some worry in the applicant themselves. There's also an issue with this particular policy in that it relies on previous victims to have been created in order for the information to be held. So when we talk about preventative nature of it, it's not really preventing that original victimisation, it's preventing future victimisation. However, the media have reported on it slightly differently. So here's a selection of some local media reports into how Clare's Law has been operating in their various cities. So some of the words that they use in these reports are quite concerning. Clare's Law is saving lives. It's allowing women to escape violent partners. It's a total success. We currently don't know this. We don't know how Clare's Law is working when a disclosure has been made. Did the applicant stay in the relationship? Are they safe now? Did they leave? We know that in most cases, it's when a woman leaves that the violence escalates and becomes very serious. So has this accelerated violence in a way that it wouldn't ordinarily have done? What did the police do? They have a finite point in which they can interact with an applicant. They don't necessarily have the resources to safeguard for an infinite period afterwards. So how are domestic violence service providers dealing with this when they're already under significant pressure with fewer resources working with people who are already victims of domestic violence? So these are questions that I'm seeking to answer in my research. Literally, who is finding out about this scheme? Who's applying to it? Where could we be advertising it wider? How are the police working with it? How are domestic violence service providers and advisors working with it? What are the applicants doing with the information? What are they doing after they've found out the information? And what about those people who've applied, who haven't had a disclosure made, but have concerns about their partner? What's happening to them? So these are all things that I'm seeking to find out through interviews, focus groups, surveys, and research with people who are invested in this particular policy. If you'd like to know more about this research, then please feel free to contact me. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching.